Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective. I'm your host, Brian Perez. We are here live in the studio on this Tuesday afternoon. We'd love to answer the questions you might have about the Bible, the Christian faith, how to walk the Christian walk. We'd love to hear your questions. What's going on in your life? 888-564-6173 is the number to call. Maybe you read something in your devotional this morning or heard something here on the radio or saw something strange on YouTube. Let's discuss it at 888-564-6173. Answering your questions today, we've brought in Richard Cimino. He is one of the assistant pastors at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. How are you, Richard?
Doing great, thanks.
Great to have you here, sir. All is good. And Bruce Zachary joins us once again. He's the senior pastor at Calvary Nexus, which is in Nexus, California. No, it's in Camarillo, California. So if anybody's planning a road trip this summer up north, and it's going to involve a weekend stay, you can go visit their church there, Calvary Nexus. How are you, Bruce?
Yeah, doing great. Really looking forward to spending time with you and Richard, Brian, and of course our guests.
Yes, indeed. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. If you're watching us online, Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, the number's right there on the bottom of your screen. There's also a QR code that you can scan, and that'll take you to the page on kwave.com where you can submit a question online. That's not the best way to get an answer because we prefer to dialogue with you, so call us. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. You can also send in your questions using the Pastor's Perspective Facebook Messenger or by DMing us on the Pastor's Perspective Instagram. In fact, I've got one of those Facebook questions right now. This one is from Dina, who writes, how much protection during the tribulation will believers have, those left behind who are not deceived and accept the truth, such as when the seas and rivers and springs are turned to blood, will God provide water for the believers? And will believers during the tribulation die of other causes besides being martyred? Bruce, what do you say to Dina?
Yeah, first of all, I just appreciate the question. We're talking about tribulation saints, those who come to faith after the rapture of the church during the Great Tribulation. And we would liken that to God's protection of Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in the flaming fire, that God knows how to protect those who are his. And in regard to the judgment of turning seas into blood and rivers into blood, bodies of water, we see that when the first plague was visited upon the Egyptians, as the Nile was turned into blood, that God provided water for his people. That God knows how to protect and God knows how to provide. And we're not told all the details in Revelation, but we can have confidence that God is going to protect those who are his.
Richard?
In regard to martyrdom,
go ahead, Bruce.
We do see that there are those who are martyred, tribulation saints who are martyred for their faith, but we could also presume that people will be dying of other causes during the Great Tribulation. There's going to be, unfortunately, quite a lot of bloodshed, quite a lot of loss of life in that time, the judgment.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
Richard?
yeah. That's great, Bruce. I agree with all of it. And I was just thinking about the latter, the last statement that you made. Even as believers today, we're not, because of our faith in Jesus, we're not exempt from suffering and death by pestilence, famine. I mean, there are Christians that starve to death. There are Christians who die in pandemics. And so we're not given any information that would be different during the Great Tribulation. In fact, it would just the brokenness of the planet is going to be so radical we can't even begin to comprehend it. And but as you said, God has preserved his people before and has his ways and means to do it. And we leave that. I think we leave that and rest in the sovereignty of God in this thing. So
yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, we all see, obviously, this is not the Great Tribulation, but there is tribulation on the planet. And I think the most recent statistics that I saw from Open Doors, which I believe was published at the end of 2023, 1 in 7 Christians were being persecuted on the planet, which is just a remarkable thought to consider. You know, of an estimated 2.2 billion believers, 1 in 7 are being persecuted in diverse places.
Yeah, and you can keep up with the persecuted church on the Open Doors website, which is opendoorsus.org. It's a great resource. And the World Watch list, yeah, that's something that they publish about once a year, and you can get all the details there.
Yeah.
All right, who is that? Dina. Yeah, Dina, thank you for sending in your question on the Pastor's Perspective Facebook Messenger. And here's another one that was sent in that same way. It's from Archie in Roanoke, Virginia. I wanted to ask if you would please speak to the theory that Jesus has already come back and we're actually living in the tribulation or millennial reign. I've kind of looked at this before but didn't get very deep, and I want to start at least having a good explanation why I know this is not the case, and I want to get it from the pros. Thank you all. Bruce, what do you say to Archie?
Yeah, it's kind to be thought of as a pro. He must have thought that someone else was hosting today. Archie, I appreciate the question. I appreciate Dina's question as well. In Matthew 24, Jesus gave the Olivet Discourse, what we know as the Olivet Discourse, as he was telling his disciples what would be the signs preceding his return and trying to address their question when this was going to happen. And during that discourse, he tells them that there's going to be false Christ, false messiahs. The people will say that the Messiah is here, the Christ is there, and don't believe them. And the reason that we know that those prophets are false and they're false messiahs is that when Jesus returns, his second coming, everyone's going to see it like lightning filling up the sky. It's going to be evident to all. And that is one way that we know that claims of Jesus making a secret appearance to a particular group, whether it's a cult or some other group engaged in some form of mysticism, why it's a false claim. Jesus warned us in that Olivet Discourse how we would know it was false. The other questions about the millennial kingdom that we see described in Revelation 20, we also see it described, for example, in Isaiah chapter 11. That's where we see the lion lying down with the lamb. In Isaiah 65, some of the other elements of the millennial kingdom is restoration of the creation. And currently, we do not see that taking place on our planet at all. There is constant warfare on the planet. The lion and the lamb are not lying down. And similarly, we're living in an age where there's a lot of destruction to the creation. There's a lot of destruction to the environment. And this is not a time where the creation is being restored yet. So we know it's not the millennial reign.
Richard.
Yeah, not only is the restoration of creation, but just the absence of universal peace and justice. And
Amen.
The millennial reign is described in Revelation 20, like Jesus is reigning on the earth, Satan is bound. And in Isaiah chapter 2 and also Isaiah 11,
amen.
Peace and justice are going to be, they're the foundation of his throne. He'll reign in righteousness forever, rule and reign in righteousness and forever. So the absence of all of those things that you mentioned, Bruce, and even the cosmic upheavals, we're not witnessing those as well. So aren't you just thankful for, like Jesus said, no, you are going to hear these things, but let me just tell you in advance, this is what will be the sure realities of my return to the earth. So.
Mm-hmm. Very true. All right. Who was that? That was Archie. That's right. Oh, Archie. Thank you for sending in your question on the Pastor's Perspective Facebook Messenger. Now let's go to the phones. 888-564-6173 is our number. That is the number Arturo dialed from Moreno Valley. He's watching us on YouTube. We'll wave to Arturo. What's your question for us, Arturo?
Yes, I was just wondering, I know that God made Adam and Eve, but who made the other creation so they could have a partner besides Adam and Eve in order to make more children? Like, for instance, their kids, where did they get their spouse from? Who made them?
Okay. Richard?
I think Adam and Eve supplied them. That would be my simple answer.
But then the next question would be, wouldn't those then be siblings?
At that time, they would have been.
I was wondering, wouldn't they would be siblings? Is that the reason why they, if I'm not mistaken, is that the reason somewhere in the Bible, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, that not to go out with none of your cousins or something like that? I'm not 100% sure, but I think I heard something like that.
Yeah,
because it was changed?
Well, I would say the first reason why we can say that was reality is the Bible gives us no other things. It just says they continued to have children, and their children had children. Mm-hmm. So because there was no other alternative source of having children, that would be it. I think because the fall had not taken place, but recently, it was so short-lived that the kind of genetic degradation that has happened since then. That's one reason why marrying your siblings is not a wise idea to do, because of the genetic, degradation that's happened.
Yeah.
So I would just say putting it that close to the fall, and there was no other recourse. But the Bible just doesn't tell us. Wouldn't it be great if it said that Cain married Elizabeth or whatever?
Yeah.
We know, But later down, it does say it starts to name some of those families, and daughters of people in those families, and
How many generations, Bruce, do you think it went on where sibling marriage was allowed, or sibling? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see that. By the way, Richard, I appreciate your answer to Arturo's question. I think it's the right answer. So we see that Abraham is still saying that Sarah is his sister and she is his half sister, and so That's several generations. I'm not sure that the Genesis record is intended to be a complete record of the generations or the genealogies. I certainly don't seek to try to date the creation from those genealogies. But I agree with Richard about the genetic condition that sin had just entered into the universe, and presumably the impact of sin and the genetic mutations that are caused by sin, the degradation, as Richard said, was less prevalent, so it was less of an issue. Arturo mentioned about cousins. Actually, cousins are never prohibited from the Mosaic Law in regard to marriage, but many would make the case, as Richard said, as far as the genetic pool, it's not necessarily a wise idea unless you live in Louisiana. And just kidding, Louisiana.
Oh, great.
But
Yeah.
no,
We just lost our Louisiana audience. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, cousins are not precluded. Matter of fact, Jacob is told to go to Laban, the brother of his mother, in other words, his uncle, to take a daughter, which would be his cousin.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, Richard?
Yeah, Genesis 1:28 says Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters. And how else do they, when you just start thinking about it, it's not complex. Even though God doesn't give us the specifics, God said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So be it. Arturo, thank
Only
you
one
for your
way to
phone
do
call.
that.
Yeah, there is. Arturo, thank you for your phone call today here on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call from now until 4 o'clock. And here's another question that was sent in online. It is from Shauna, who listens in Rialto on FM 107.9 K-Wave. Shauna writes, I've been walking with the Lord consistently for a little over a year. I've been going through a lot. I was laid off. I've been having people agree together to come against me in matters that are unfair. I'm not the victim, but I just don't understand what exactly is going on. I always look in the mirror first to try to find what I could do better. I believe it's spiritual attacks. Richard, would you agree with Shauna?
I would say in a very broad stroke, absolutely. And let me explain. First of all, Jesus said in John 16:33, he goes, these things I've spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. Okay? I think the reason we have tribulation in the world is because it's fallen. And in that general sense, if you look at Ephesians chapter 2, the very beginning there, Paul says, and you he made alive who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world. So in other words, there's been this stream of humanity that's been walking in a particular course, and behind the course of this world is the God, little g God of this world. It says, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience. And I think all of his efforts in our broken world is to drive men and women from the worship of the true and living God. And so the course of this world, once you're made alive, you're no longer floating in that stream. You're actually moving against that stream. So in that broad sense, you're facing spiritual opposition continually, right? And think about this, think of the way Jesus describes the citizens in his kingdom in the Beatitudes. I mean, who wouldn't want to be with those people? I mean, humble. They're mourning over the brokenness of the world and the brokenness of their own lives. They're merciful or compassionate. They're meek. They don't want to use power to disadvantage anybody. They don't want to trample over people. They're willing to trust God with their successes and with their gains. But Jesus, then he went on to say, he says, you, these citizens in my kingdom, you are the salt of the earth. And you're the light of the world. And we are living as light in the world in a dark world. And I want you to consider the fact that, like, if you're in a very dark room for a period of time, but your eyes are open, your pupils dilate to get any little bits of light they can get. And somebody flips on that light, it's very uncomfortable. It's literally physically uncomfortable. You usually throw things in that direction of the light switch, right? And then when you think about, like, if you have salt and you have a wound, salt stings. Salt's a cathartic. It's a very good thing that salt can cleanse, but it cleanses. The stinging you feel is the cathartic influence of the salt. And so if we're salt in a world that is kind of a festering wound, morally and spiritually, and we're light in a world that's walking in the dark concerning God, then that's why that declaration is so close to Jesus saying, "So blessed are you when you're persecuted." Mm-hmm. And he said even the night before he died, if the world hated him, it's going to hate you. Why? Because we express his ways and his person and his nature in a world that doesn't want to be exposed to that. So that's the broad stroke, I think, of persecution. And yes, there can truly be, I believe, Satan has a legion, he has minions that followed him in his rebellion against God, and they work on us. They're not omniscient, they're not omnipotent, but they spend a lot of time. And their job is to, now that we belong to the Lord, to keep us from everything God has for us in, with, through, and by Jesus. And he will use people. He'll use the influence of the god of this world in media, all sorts of things work in terms of spiritual warfare against us.
And they never stop either, because there could be someone who, let's just say they have a better time of recognizing when the enemy is coming against them, and so they're able to, either resist temptation, whatever. And then they get to this point, like, for example, in their ministry or whatever, where things are going well, or so it seems from the outside. Satan or his demons never actually say, you know what, we're never going to get this guy. Let's just leave him alone. No, they'll still attack, won't they, Bruce?
They're waiting for an opportune time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shauna, first of all, I am so sorry that you're going through this. That is not fun at all. It's got to be very frustrating. It's got to be very discouraging. You mentioned that you've been walking with the Lord pretty close for the last year, and I think it takes quite a while walking with Christ where you don't get discouraged in the midst of difficulty. Even people who've walked with the Lord for a real long time can get easily discouraged by circumstances and difficulty. I also just want to commend you that you've been walking close with the Lord the last year. I also want to commend you when the question was asked that you said you were willing to look in the mirror, that's your MO, to look in the mirror, to ask, is it I? Where am I at fault? And that's really commendable. I think whenever I receive some type of criticism, I always want to look for at least a kernel of truth and then let the chaff blow away and grow from the truth. And so I commend you for doing that as well. As Pastor Richard said, I don't know if everything that's going on is a direct result of a spiritual battle. Yes, as Richard said, we are in the midst of a spiritual battle. All of creation is. I try to look and think, is what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, merely the physical universe? Is it spiritual elements? Is it my emotions? A combination of those things. And that sometimes can be very helpful for me. I think if you have godly people in your life who can offer you counsel, who are close with you as to what's going on, that could be really helpful. But I think it also can be really encouraging when you see or contemplate the end result. For example, James, the half-brother of Jesus, said, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. He didn't say if, it was certain when. And he said fall, it's sudden, it's unexpected. And James' encouragement to us was that those trials produce patience, which produces character, which produces hope as an end result. And I'm also comforted as I think about Paul's writing to the church at Philippi. He says in the 3rd chapter at verse 10 that he wants to know Jesus and the power of his resurrection. And man, I wish that verse just ended there with an exclamation point, but it doesn't. He said, I want to know the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, being conformed to his spiritual death. And God is using all of these difficulties to mold and shape you to be more like him. And that could be encouragement and a source of hope in the midst of this.
Shauna, thank you for sending in your question on the kwave.com Pastor's Perspective page. And everybody listening and watching, please keep Shauna in your prayers. 888-564-6173 is the number to call us today. We're going to be in the studio for another 35 minutes or so. 888-564-6173. That number is good right now if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram as well. So call in, ask your question. We've got Richard Cimino and Bruce Zachary here. Renee calling in from Orange County, California, listening on FM 107.9. Hello, Renee. What's your question for us today?
Hey, pastors. Thank you for taking my call. So as far as I know, God is good, and everything that comes from God is good. So nothing bad can happen that God created, right? Because he's not going to forsake us. So along with that, I understand that sin entered the world through Adam and Eve eating of the fruit. But Satan was the one that tempted Eve. So that in itself was sin on his part, and he fell from heaven because of his pride, which is sin. So how is it that sin was in heaven for Satan to become prideful?
Yeah, great question. Bruce, what would you say to Renee?
Yeah, Renee, I appreciate the question. Yeah, so we see in the planet Earth, which is a part of God's creation in our universe, that the very first time that sin enters into that part of God's creation is a result of what we see in Genesis chapter 3, the rebellion of Adam and Eve, where they have just one rule, and don't eat of the fruit of that tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And as soon as they violate, as soon as they rebel, as soon as they neglect this command in willful violation, sin enters into our world and our creation is marred. But in regard to when sin first occurs in God's creation, we don't know. We know that Lucifer's rebellion against God precedes his being cast out of heaven. And it appears from Revelation 12 that he leads 1/3 of the angelic host in rebellion against God. And that rebellion, that willful failure to yield to God, an intentional rebellion, is sin, and it's preceding what happened in Genesis 3. And so sin is anytime we are rebelling against God's authority, whether it is unintentional or willful.
Richard?
Yeah, and I think that, if you keep taking that question, try to work it backwards as far as you can. And Renee, you kind of said, well, how did that happen? How did Satan fall? Like in the perfection of God, in the presence of God's holiness, these angelic beings existed. Where did that idea come?
Right, because Satan tempts us. So who tempts Satan?
Yeah. Well, here's this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I think that's where you're going. I want to recommend to you a book called "The God I Don't Understand," and it's by a guy named Christopher Wright. He's a profound theologian, an Irishman. If you like to listen to audible books, this is one to get. It's him.
He reads it himself?
He reads
with
it
his
himself
Irish accent?
with his Irish lilt.
Yes.
And you just don't want to stop listening. And there's such a gentleness to him, but such a clarity. And he says this in chapter 1. He says, "It seems to me that when we read the Bible asking God, where did evil come from? How did it originally get started? God seems to reply, that is not something I intend to tell you. In other words, the Bible compels us to accept the mystery of evil. Notice, I do not say compels us to accept evil. The Bible never does that or asks us to do so. We are emphatically told to reject and resist evil. Rather, I mean that the Bible leads us to accept that evil is a mystery, especially in terms of its origin, a mystery that we humans cannot fully understand or explain." That's so helpful. It's just so, thank you. So I got to start with what I do know. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to start working from what I don't know. I can't remember who said this once. And Bruce, if you ever heard the reference to it and know where it came from. But it goes something like this. You don't try to understand something by grasping in the dark. Like, don't start from the dark and try to work towards light. You start from light and work towards what's dark. And so when God says, I'm not giving you that light, well, then we're just going to be groping in the dark to find some answer to something he hasn't given us light on. But when we want to walk in the light of what we do know. What we do know about God is everything that needs to be known about God to have life with him forever. And so I would really encourage you. You're not the first person to ask that question. You won't be the last one. At times, there's going to be times when I'll kind of go, I'll ask questions like that. Like, I wonder why we don't know about that. Where did that really start? But if we don't know and God hasn't said, then that's the place where he goes, just trust me. That's not what you need to know. I want you to major on what I want you to know, and I've given you that in the person of my Son and in the pages of my Word.
That's such a good point. Bruce, what would you add?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Renee, and I commend you for just pondering that and seeking to discern. It appears that God gives human beings moral agency. In other words, the capacity to make moral decisions that have implications, as well as the capacity to know right from wrong. And absent that moral agency, what sometimes gets referred to as free will, that our love for God couldn't be tested. In other words, if we were compelled to respond in a certain way, didn't have moral agency, then our love would not appear real as a response, as a result of moral agency. And similarly, it appears that the angelic beings also have moral agency. As a result of that, people and angelic beings made choices and make choices, and that display love for God, worship for God, or rebellion against God. And that's really the essence of the progeny of sin, or rebellion.
Renee, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. The book that Richard mentioned is called The God I Don't Understand, Reflections on Tough Questions of Faith. It is by Christopher Wright, Wright. And Richard recommends you listen to it on audiobook because you'll hear Mr. Wright's Irish accent. I don't listen to audiobooks. They're just not my thing. They put me to sleep. But this one, I think I just might give this one a listen.
You need to.
Yeah. The God I don't understand.
Box of Lucky Charms.
Perfect. I like that. All right, 888.
You just dated yourself.
Yeah. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. We are in the middle of a great episode, and why don't you participate? We would love to hear your questions. Andrea, you'll be coming up first after the break, and we'll be back with your questions as well. 888-564-6173. Richard Cimino and Bruce Zachary answering your questions today till 4. 888-564-6173. I'm craving a bowl of Lucky Charms. What in the world? Thank you, Bruce Zachary, for that. Bruce is the pastor of Calvary Nexus in Camarillo, California, and he joins us today on Pastor's Perspective. In the studio here, Richard Cimino, one of the assistant pastors at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. I'm your host, Brian Perez. We've got about 25 more minutes to go. Grab an open line. What do you want to ask these two guys? 888-564-6173 is the number to call. We're going to go to Riverside. Here is Andrea. Hi there, Andrea. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective. What's on your mind today?
Hello. Well, my son kind of presented me with a question that kind of hit me a little bit too, and I had a hard time explaining to him my side.
Well, how old is your son?
To see your guy. He's 13. No, he's 12.
12. Almost 13. 12 going on 13.
Yeah.
Great age.
Yes.
So what is that question?
All right. So my son is well aware that his dad and I are not married. He understands that we had him before marriage. So essentially his question was, so you having me without being married was a sin, and I said, essentially, and then he said, well, then how can you convince me that I'm a gift if I was conceived under sin? And aren't I just your consequence?
Wow.
Am I your mistake?
Now, when he asked you this question, I mean, where does this question come from? Is he, I don't know, because that's very deep in some ways. It's very, like, is he questioning his existence or anything like that? I mean, I would hope not.
So there's that. So he does have, he has had issues or concerns with suicidal ideation. I'm not a new Christian, but I'm practicing it. We're more new to it, where I'm practicing, I'm more involved, and I'm learning more. So oftentimes I tell him, you were meant to be here. You were created before I even knew. God created you in my womb. Before he created you in my womb, he knew you. You have a purpose, And so I always tell him these things. But he also likes to challenge me in the sense of I'm trying to give him biblical, advice on how he should do things. And then he comes back at me with, well, you and dad aren't married, and, well, you guys had me before marriage, so I'm a sin, or am I a mistake? And then when I tell him you're a gift from God, he questions that. How can you consider me a gift from God? Why would God gift you me if you were involved in sin, essentially?
So, Richard, what would you say, first of all, to Andrea?
Well, there's a lot of nuance here.
Yeah.
There's a lot. That's a lot of ground to cover. First of all, thank you for calling.
Yes.
And thank you I just for being honest and sharing this. Yeah. And we surely want to be praying for your son and with any kind of suicidal thoughts and ideations. It's heartbreaking to think that that's epidemic in amongst teens today. Yeah. And we'll be praying for you because, being the parent. So let's just start with, how can I have value in a world if I was illegitimate? And I think the starting point is God alone is the author of life. And so any human being is created in the image of God. And that didn't stop with the fall. In fact, it's after the flood where God tells Noah, look, you shall not kill anybody because they're bearing the image of God. That's post-flood, right? So even fallen mankind still bears the image of God. And granted, in many ways, it's we don't bear it perfectly. We distort his image, and some people, in some ways, even unbelieving people, image him well. With their generosity, with their kindness. You can meet a lot of unbelieving people, and you can see the image of God still there in their lives, though they're not yet born again, and they're not yet adopted children of God, reconciled to God, members of the household of God, citizens in the kingdom of God, but yet they still do bear the image of God. And so what you want to communicate to him is there is not a human being breathing that is not an image bearer. And that is his great value. That gives him the value that is so great that God would say, I will come to rescue you from the consequences of sin. That's the value. How valuable is he? Look at the price that God paid so that he could belong to God.
Yeah.
And that's for everybody that's walking on the face of the earth. So that to me is the starting point. Bruce, I don't know how you want to chime into that layer of this onion, but
Bruce, maybe what you can do is just like direct your answer right at Andrea's son. Like if he was the one calling, maybe Andrea will show this to him on YouTube or Facebook. And
I'd love to.
Yeah.
First of all, I just want to encourage you, Andrea. I greatly respect your vulnerability, your transparency. I greatly respect your son at 12 years of age. It's just reminding me of Jesus in the temple questioning the rabbis. Yep. And he's deep, and he's thinking existential questions, philosophical questions that are really deep. I think, as a person of his age, as you contemplate just life, and you recognize that suffering is inescapable. If you were to ask the question as a philosophical idea, is it right for any parent to bring a child into the world knowing that that child is going to experience suffering? And in general, on balance, the degree of suffering and the degree of pleasure or joy are both going to be about the same. Is it selfish for any parent to bring a child into the world? And as a philosophical discussion, you could argue both of those positions. It's wrong, it's right. The thing that changes that discussion is the gospel, because you can't get into his world, the world which is to come, without going into this world first and experiencing suffering. And I would just remind your son, he's at a time of life that is likened to a bar mitzvah age, an age where he is old enough to understand his own relationship with God. And if you look at a bar mitzvah as simply a rite of passage, as one is moving to a new stage of life, you recognize that Jesus' baptism, the beginning of his ministry, was a rite of passage. And it is there that the Father declared, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And similarly, at the Mount of Transfiguration, as Jesus was making his way to Jerusalem to go to the cross, again, it's a rite of passage. And again, the Father's declaring over his Son, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And Andrea, I'm confident that you're doing this, but reminding your son that he is well pleasing to you is so important at this stage and every stage of his life, that you cannot be a consequence of my sin as though it was judgment. And the way you know that is because you are a blessing to me, not a curse. You are a blessing to me. And to remind him that, and to remind him that God is pleased with him. And as you mentioned to him, God knows his whole life, his beginning from the end, formed in the womb. He had works for him to walk in that he created before he even created this universe. And he's going to have the joy of discovering those, and that it gets better, and not to lose hope. As he draws closer to God, he's going to discover more, that all of us in this conversation, Richard, Brian, myself, and I'm sure you, Andrea, we all have regrets. Not to have regrets is sociopathic. So to have regrets in life is part of the human experience. As we walk closer to Christ in greater obedience to Christ, we reduce our regrets. And it's okay to say to your son, I regret that I wasn't married, or words like that, but I don't regret that you're my son.
That's great.
Anything to add, Richard?
Are we correct? Am I hearing you correctly when you say you're still presently not married?
Correct.
Okay. Well,
Father is an unbeliever.
Mm-hmm.
So my son is pretty much stuck in the middle of a believer and an unbeliever, and he's primarily with me. His father is on the road, but so he sees me, going to church, and every so often I try to throw this and that in, and so he's kind of questioning me, and it's definitely, my son's more of it's definitely, he's paying attention to what I'm doing.
That's
and
a great thing.
It matches with what I'm saying,
Yes, that's
so
a great
why
thing.
Those questions come through where he challenges me, like, am I really doing the right thing? And so he's at that stage where you say this, but are you doing it?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I would say that for your witness' sake, it would be really good to sort this out. Because your son's asking legitimate questions, and we want to have a continuity between our profession and our lives as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you. Like, are you fellowshipping any place regularly right now?
Yes.
I would sit down and have a talk with one of the pastors. Just sit down and say, this is what's going on. My son sees the inconsistencies. It hurts me to give him a right answer when he's pointing out something obvious that's inconsistent in my life. And you can share with that pastor. I would not even begin to pretend to ask you to share, with however many people are listening right now, but share with that pastor, like, why is it that you're right here? What are your concerns? What are the things that are preventing you from having your life more consistent with what the Word of God says?
Yeah. Bruce?
Yeah, I just agree with Richard's counsel. And Andrea, I would remind your son that Psalm 127 at verse 3 says that children are a gift from the Lord, and that he is a gift from God, and that he's not a gag gift, that he is a precious gift and a beloved gift.
I just looked up that passage, Psalm 127:3. It doesn't say legitimately born children or anything like that are a heritage from the Lord. It says children, all children are a heritage from the Lord. Andrea, thank you for calling in today. If everybody listening and watching can keep Andrea and her son and dad in your prayers. And also, Andrea, I hope your son's in some kind of counseling or something for this suicidal ideation that he's going through. All right. 888-564-6173 is our number. Here is Karen, who's listening on FM 107.9 in Huntington Beach. Hi there, Karen. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah. How can we help you?
Well, I belong to this online group that helps you save money and tips and tricks and things like that. But there are so many people in the comments of this group who say, well, no, don't get anything at a thrift store because, demons or evil spirits could be attached to the things that were donated, or the people that donated the items could have been into witchcraft, and you'll bring that spirit back into your house. I do see in the Bible that demons have the ability to sort of interact with the physical world. Like they were able to throw that child into the fire, for example, or the man of the tombs they gave him strength to be able to break chains. So I see that, but I don't see where, they could be attached to a jacket that you buy at a thrift store or a couch.
Hiding in the pockets.
Well, yeah, so many people in the comments were so convinced. Oh, no, don't buy anything at a thrift store.
Okay.
There were so many people that were convinced it was true. So I don't know.
All right, Richard.
Well,
is your Stussy hat, did you buy that at a thrift store?
I got it at a vintage store. Yes, I did. And I checked inside first. It's not there.
Okay.
Well, Karen, I think, first of all, that you want to be fiscally responsible, and you're looking for ways and hints, and you're engaged in ongoing conversations. That's great. I think that's really good. But when you begin to see those kinds of things said, you have to kind of go, okay, so some of these people, they've got a line of thought that doesn't converge with mine, or that diverges from me at this point, because truthfully, my wife and I, we bring stuff and donate stuff to thrift stores all the time. And there are many more people just like us who are not, involved in covens or anything like that. They're not worshiping the devil, and they're doing that. And, we don't know who's doing what in everything and whatever, but the idea that, the demons are attaching themselves to articles of clothing, I wouldn't want to pretend to try to answer that thing with any kind of rational weight. But I would say that we don't know what anybody's doing who's packaging the meat that you're buying in the grocery store.
Oh, no.
Now
I'm scared.
Yeah. Or the people that built your car.
Right.
Or the people that refurbished the car that you bought, or the people that built your home, or any of those things.
Yeah.
A lot of those people are watching too much Stephen King or whatever, I think, to think like, no, that's not the road. Or so many of those, that genre of movies where, people move into houses and all of a sudden demons come running through the walls or whatever. Like they just need to take a breath.
Yeah.
And you just have got to discount, like, whatever's going on there. There's some credibility issues if that's the thing that you want to be, leaning hard on.
Yeah. Now we know Bruce is okay. He's wearing a T-shirt right now that you can see on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. It says, "Love God, love neighbor, repeat." So even if he got it at a thrift store, it's blessed.
By the way,
right?
I still want to tell you, that's brilliant, Bruce.
Yes.
First time I ever saw that, he had stickers, and we had a bunch made for our church and plastered it on my coffee container and everything. Man, that's great. I love it.
Yep.
Yeah, during the pandemic, there's 2 billboards in our whole town, and we rented one during the pandemic and put this on: "Love God, love neighbor, repeat." It was great. Karen, I am so sorry that you're having to navigate these issues. I, like Richard, donate clothes to thrift shops, and I also purchase a ton of clothes. I have purchased a ton of clothes through the years from vintage stores, thrift shops. And remember, this group you're participating in, you're looking for some tips and advice related to finance, not related to theology. And so it's good that if you have a check in your spirit that I don't think what these people are suggesting about theology is on point, I just respect you for looking to get some insight and calling in. So that's great. I don't recall any example of demons occupying any inanimate object in the scriptures. We do see that humans can be possessed. We don't see any example of a believer in the New Testament once you've received the Holy Spirit being possessed by demons, although they could be oppressed. But I wouldn't associate that with a household appliance, an article of clothing, or the like. So, yeah. If it's so, it's probably got the Raiders NFL logo on it, but I wouldn't worry.
And I would say it's safe to shop at a Salvation Army thrift store, for sure.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
They demon check every article.
They demon check everything. That's right. Karen, hope that
Thank you so
answers
much, Karen,
your question.
for calling in.
Thank you. Love you guys.
Love you too. Thanks for listening, and keep on clipping those coupons. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. Let's answer a question that was sent in online. This one is from Buddy in Fullerton. He asks, is Israel responsible for the famine-like conditions in Gaza? Bruce, what do you say to Buddy?
Yeah, so this is a complicated question. I appreciate the question. I would say certainly Israel has some part in it, but it's important to recognize that the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023, where over 250 Israeli citizens were taken hostage, is a declaration of war against the nation state of Israel. And Israel has declared war against Hamas in response. Israel has consistently asked for the release of its hostages and has promised a cessation of the war. In exchange, Hamas has refused to release the hostages. Israel's decision to attempt to liberate hostages and continue to try to eliminate Hamas in the midst of this war has resulted in horrendous conditions for Palestinians as well as the region, and efforts by various parties, including the United States, Israel, and Egypt, to bring in relief. The United Nations Food and Other Relief has been primarily blocked by Hamas as a terrorist organization. So yes, I would say that Israel has some responsibility for what is going on there in the Gaza region, but I would say that the greater weight of responsibility rests squarely on the shoulders of Hamas as a terrorist organization that is dedicated to the elimination of Israel.
I saw a video a few weeks ago of, it was just a video taken underground or something in one of the tunnels, and it showed a lot of these terrorists gorging on food, all this food that they had, everything that they had available to them. Meanwhile, the people above ground were starving. So that was kind of like, wait a minute, why isn't this being talked about more? But I don't know if you saw that.
I think another aspect is that Hamas as an organization wants to create enough public bad will towards the nation state of Israel to force the creation of a Palestinian state as part of what is presently the nation state of Israel. And towards that aim, the destruction of its own citizens is just a price to pay towards that aim as far as Hamas is concerned.
All right, buddy. Thank you for sending in your question on the Pastor's Perspective page on kwave.com. Caleb, you've got a comment listening on AM 1110 K-Wave in Tustin. Go ahead, Caleb.
Hey, I was just calling in. It really touched me when the lady, she called in and she had her son. He was questioning his purpose, and because his mother made a mistake and father that they had him, outside of marriage. The scripture that came to me was Jeremiah 1:5. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. So you guys said something awesome, that God is sovereign and he's the author of all life. But I mean, it's the kind of thing that makes our minds go tilt, like a pinball machine, that he knew us. He's outside eternity. He knew us before and after. So it's a mystery if I try to think too much about that. But for him to know that even the scripture that he works all things together for good for those who are called, love God and called to his purposes, that the kid's not a mistake. There's a deep, deep thing going on in all life and every person. Very
true. Bruce, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Caleb, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, Andrea actually referenced Jeremiah 1:5 without giving the address. And it appears that she has shared that with her son, which is great. And I agree that God is going to redeem for all those who are his and called according to his purpose. He's in the business of redemption. And so this is not beyond his power and capacity and his love and mercy to redeem.
Very true. Caleb, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. I think we have time for one more. This one was sent in on Facebook from Brittany in Antelope, California. She asks, does it really matter if a Christian follows the Shroud of Turin as part of historical research? Not quite sure exactly what Brittany means by that, but I think she just means, should Christians maybe believe that this is true, or should we study it, research it? What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to kind of figure out, is she asking, is it okay for Christians to research this thing? Or is it like it's a settled matter of historical research, so it's okay to say that really is the image of Jesus from his blood? Mm-hmm. I've never really spent a lot of time thinking about the shroud personally. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to bounce this one to the other side of the table and wait for the attorney to give me his.
Oh, yes. Get his perspective.
Yeah. So I think as to the legitimacy of the Shroud of Turin, there is some who would argue that it is the literal burial cloth that Jesus was wrapped with. Others would argue that it is a medieval forgery dated about 1300 AD. And if your question is, hey, I'm interested in this and I want to research it, there's nothing in the Bible that's prohibiting you from researching or checking out, similar to the Holy Grail. You want to try to avoid making the shroud or any other object an idol. For example, the burial of Moses. No one knows where Moses is buried, and it appears the concern is that the remains of Moses would become an idol to the Jewish people. And so we always want to be cautious about that any object doesn't become the object of our idolatry.
Brittany, thank you so much for sending in your question. Hope we answered it. God bless you guys. Thanks for listening and watching today. We will be back tomorrow from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. We would love to hear your questions about the Bible, the Christian faith. As you're reading your Bible this evening or tomorrow morning, write stuff down that you'd like to call in and ask. We would love to try to answer your question here on Pastor's Perspective. For Richard Cimino and our guest, Bruce Zachary, it's Bruce's second time on the program now. Congratulations, Bruce. We'll do it again next Tuesday, yeah?
Yes.
Looking forward.
Awesome. All right, Bruce is the pastor of Calvary Nexus in Camarillo. Richard's one of the assistant pastors here at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. I'm Brian Perez. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching Pastor's Perspective.